They were never supposed to be found. The floorboards were nailed shut from the inside. That's what the first investigator wrote after prying open the wooden planks beneath the abandoned church. What lay beneath wasn't a foundation, it was a mass grave. 143 bodies, each bearing signs of deliberate torment. Arms broken and rehealed, teeth shattered, bones etched with symbols no anthropologist could identify. This wasn't a place of worship, it was a chamber of transformation and annihilation. This is not folklore. This is not myth. These are federal records sealed for over a century until someone broke protocol and handed over files they weren't allowed to possess. They were scared when they did it. You will understand why soon enough. But you need to understand something first. History, as you were taught, it is a lie. Not just the clean scrub stories of nations and flags and wars, not just the patriotism and textbooks, but the very structure of what you believe to be true about human morality, religion, and power. That's what the Ravencroft family understood, and what they exploited. They found the cracks in belief itself, and once inside, they built a kingdom of obedience through suffering. Their rise didn't begin in darkness. It began in longing. A country searching for spiritual meaning, a people lost after war, famine, and industrial cruelty. Into that longing, 3 brothers stepped forward, Ezra, Silas, and Caleb. They came like shepherds. They left like gods. But what they built in Ravenwood, New York was never about salvation. It was about dominion. This video is not entertainment, it's initiation. If you continue past this point, you're accepting that what you hear may alter your understanding of the world forever. There are truths you cannot unhear, patterns you'll start seeing in places you were never meant to look. Understand, the Ravencroft story isn't just about a cult, it's about the blueprint. A system designed to bind the human will, break it, rebuild it, and feed off it. The Church of the Pure Spirit was merely the first draft. You're not here by accident, you found this for a reason, or maybe it found you. And now we begin. Ravenwood was not chosen by chance, it was engineered. The Ravencroft brothers arrived in the summer of 1825, but their planning began long before that. In an age without GPS, Ezra Ravencroft had hand-drawn maps of subterranean rock formations, fault lines, and mineral densities, the kind of data not available to ordinary preachers. He had correspondence with geological societies, Masonic lodges, and obscure monastic orders in Europe, all pointing to one conclusion. This ground was not spiritually neutral, it was charged. They called it thin soil, land where the veil between flesh and spirit was weakest, where influence could seep through more easily. In ancient cultures, these were places of offering, vision quests, and sacrifice. The Ravencrofts believed these locations weren't wholly by accident. They were chosen because energy could be extracted from human suffering. Ezra claimed the land sang to him the first time he set foot on it. Deacon Silas said it groaned. Caleb wept for hours without speaking. Locals chalked it up to religious fervor. They had no idea. By autumn of that year, the Ravencrofts had acquired a 47-acre tract on the forest's edge and began construction on what they called the Church of the Pure Spirit, a name they claimed was given to them in vision. No windows, no cross, no altar. The building's octagonal layout mirrored occult geometry used by Rosicrucians and the builders of the Adytum. At its center, a sunken spiral carved directly into the floor. No one in town had ever seen anything like it. But it was what they did before the building's completion that should have raised alarms. They began testing their doctrine. In the ravines and wooded clearings, they invited small groups to experience purification, ice baths, sleepless fasts, silence under threat of whipping. It was framed as spiritual trial, just as monks had done, but the psychological techniques bore eerie similarity to military interrogation manuals that wouldn't exist for another century. This was never religion, it was conditioning. They weren't saving souls, they were mapping out the mechanics of surrender, of dependency, of compliance. And their first experiments, they worked. Survivors called it the clarity. The pain left them raw, open, willing. What felt like revelation was compliance masquerading as grace. The brothers had discovered something ancient. Suffering is the most reliable key to control. By the winter of 1826, the Ravencrofts had laid the foundation, not just of stone, but of mind. Their congregation had grown to 36 devoted followers, each hand-picked, each broken in different ways. A widower who had lost his entire family in a fire, a disfigured war veteran, a mother who'd buried 4 children in 2 winters. These weren't just converts, they were raw material. Prophet Caleb called them willing vessels. Ezra referred to them as unanchored souls floating toward gravity. Silas simply noted in his journals, "Pain opens the gate, despair leaves it unguarded." Every Sunday, they held services inside the unfinished church. The rituals were unlike anything in the county. There was no music, no sermon, no joy. Instead, followers stood in absolute silence for hours, often barefoot on freezing stone. Lanterns cast elongated shadows that danced across the walls, while Ezra spoke only in whispers, making listeners lean forward, heartbeats synchronized in eerie unison. They weren't being taught scripture, they were being entrained. Psychological entrainment, the synchronization of mind and body through rhythm, repetition, and deprivation, is a known technique now. Back then, it was called devotion. The Ravencrofts understood this before psychology had a name. They knew how to take shattered people and give their pain structure, purpose, a home, and into that structure they inserted the doctrine. Suffering cleanses, obedience ascends, doubt condemns. By February, communal confessions had begun. Members would kneel before the congregation and admit their impurities. A girl confessed to touching herself and was made to fast for 6 days. A man admitted anger toward his dead wife and was made to sleep outside in the snow. Caleb claimed he could hear the voice of the Spirit telling him each person's hidden sins. The humiliation was public. The punishment was spiritualized. And the results, absolute loyalty. What modern psychology calls trauma bonding, they called rebirth. The congregation began reporting visions. Lights in the forest, voices in dreams, phantom hands guiding them during prayer. What they didn't realize was that sleep deprivation, extreme fasting, and temperature manipulation can induce hallucinations. These weren't miracles. They were chemically induced obedience. But the followers didn't question. They couldn't, because doubt was the only sin punished without warning. Once the mind is trained to fear its own questions, all that's left is obedience. And obedience is the seed of something far more dangerous: worship. Worship, as practiced in Ravenwood, bore no resemblance to Christian devotion. There was no Jesus on the cross, no open Bible on the pulpit, no hymns of salvation or grace. Instead, there was the spiral, carved into the church floor like a wound that never healed. Each member of the Church of the Pure Spirit was instructed to walk it before every gathering, barefoot, in total silence. Inward, always inward. 13 coils to the center, where they were to kneel, eyes closed, and empty themselves. Ezra called it ritualized shedding. Caleb said it was the sloughing of the self. But Silas, ever the scribe, left the most chilling description in his private journal. The spiral strips them of ego. It frays the self. By the center, they are soft clay, and we are the fire. Worship for the Ravencrofts was not about love. It was about collapse. They wanted adoration so complete, so desperate, that it dissolved identity. And they got it. One of their earliest ceremonies, the purge of flesh, involved followers whipping their own backs with knotted cords as they chanted, "Break the body, burn the rot, welcome the flame." The sound of ropes striking skin echoed through the octagonal chamber. Blood was collected in clay basins and used to draw symbols on the walls. Sigils of purification, they claimed, but these weren't Christian symbols. Later analysis by occult scholars revealed the markings closely resembled sigils used in Babylonian rites of submission to Marduk, a deity of order born from violent chaos. How did 19th century rural preachers replicate forbidden Mesopotamian rituals? The answer lies in a book, bound in black leather, wrapped in chains, and kept behind the altar, the Red Compendium, as Silas called it. No one outside the inner circle was allowed to touch it, but multiple witnesses described seeing its pages covered in symbols, anatomical drawings, and instructions written in 3 languages, Latin, Aramaic, and something unknown. Where it came from is still a mystery. Some say it was passed down from European mystics. Others claim Caleb found it in a monastery in Italy, but the truth, no one knows. What we do know is this. After the book arrived, everything changed. The rituals became darker, the language more alien, and the congregation more obedient than ever. Whatever was in that book, it wasn't from this world. By the spring of 1827, the Ravencroft brothers no longer preached, they commanded. Their followers, now numbering close to 100, didn't call them pastors, they called them titles drawn from visions. Elder Ezra was the hammer of order. Deacon Silas became the voice between pages. But Caleb was the mouth of the Spirit. He no longer spoke like a man. Witnesses described his tone as detached, spectral, as if someone else was speaking through him. His eyes rarely blinked. His hands trembled constantly, and during rituals, he often entered trances that lasted hours. What he whispered afterward changed everything. He told followers their pain created echoes, vibrations that fed something ancient, something that listened. Each scream is a beacon, he said, each drop of blood, a door. He introduced a new doctrine, the chain of ascendance. According to Caleb's revelation, souls were imprisoned by layers of false identity, name, memory, desire, fear, and only by destroying each layer through ritual suffering could a person reach their true form, the pure vessel. To ascend was to annihilate all that tied you to the world. That's when the bindings began. During certain Sunday rites, followers were now physically restrained. Their eyes were blindfolded, their ears plugged with wax, and their mouths gagged. Caleb would walk among them, touching heads, speaking in his angelic tongue. Some emerged from these rites in euphoria. Others never spoke again. One girl, 17, was kept bound for 5 straight days. When released, she had pulled out all her fingernails and smiled as she held them in her palms, offering them as tithes. She died a week later from infection. Her name never appeared in local death records. The Ravencrofts buried her beneath the church and told the congregation she had been chosen by the Spirit to dwell beyond flesh. You are probably asking, how could no one stop this? How could a town allow it? Simple. They never saw it. To outsiders, the Church of the Pure Spirit was pious, charitable, clean. The Ravencrofts donated to orphanages. Ezra hosted town meetings. Silas printed religious tracts and gave away free Bibles. They were praised in the Albany Gazette for their devotion to public morality. But beneath that facade, obedience had birthed something far more sinister, rapture through ruin.